Yesterday it was Angela Rayner, and today it's Yvette Cooper being rightly called out. Since Labour have taken over, there has been a great emphasis on the word two-tier, whether that be policing, government, or just in general in society. Now the Home Secretary has been called out in Parliament over the quote-unquote obvious two-tier law that sees people treated differently depending on their background, religious beliefs, or skin colour. We will check this out, whilst also going over all of the latest news in the country from the last 24 hours. But first, hit the like and subscribe button for more. During a statement on rioting in the House of Commons, James cleverly points out the hypocrisy of leaders of the Labour Party kneeling to Black Lives Matter rioters, but condemning UK rioter. Check the clip.
Made by one of her own ministers at the time of the riots, seemingly making excuses for armed thugs intimidating the media, undermines the government's credibility, reinforces the accusations of bias, and puts people, including police officers, at increased risk. And does she now also recognise that the Labour leadership kneeling in the immediate aftermath of the Black Lives Matter disorder, when violent protesters attacked police officers, looks like her party takes some forms of violence less seriously than other forms of violence? And does she accept that any perception whatsoever of treating the same crimes differently based on the race, religion, or community of the perpetrators increases tension rather than reduces it? And does she accept that at times of heightened tension, government ministers must be and must seem to be even-handed and demand even-handedness of others?
But I have to say to him finally, this issue about he is playing all these games, undermining the credibility of the police, trying to blame the Prime Minister for something that happened 4 years ago. He's somehow responsible for the violent disorder on our streets this summer, and also undermining the credibility of police officers who take an oath. Each individual officer takes an oath to operate without fear or favour. And I would just remind him, his predecessor, the previous Home Secretary, was the one who first tried to undermine and attack the credibility of the police in the run-up to Armistice Day, and that is why we then ended up with a bunch of thugs trying to get to the cenotaph to disrupt the service and launching violent attacks on the police. That's the only reason he got the job of Home Secretary in the first place, because everyone condemned his predecessor for her behaviour. I'm so sorry that he's decided in a leadership election to follow her example rather than something that I really thought he was better than.
In other news, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has defended Labour's controversial decision to cut winter fuel payments for pensioners. Speaking to MPs on Tuesday, Reeves described the move as tough but right, given the difficult financial conditions. The cut, which affects about 10 million elderly people, is expected to save the Treasury £1.4 billion this winter. Reeves told the House of Commons that the government is taking action to encourage uptake of pension credit by low-income pensioners, ensuring they remain eligible for winter fuel payments. She noted that the fuel price cap is lower than last winter, and the state pension will be £900 higher, helping pensioners absorb the lost benefit. Reeves was also questioned about the upcoming October budget. She stated, "I'm not going to speculate about what will be in the budget, but I'm absolutely determined to ensure that working people are better off under the last government." The Chancellor emphasised her commitment to reducing the tax burden, which she said had reached its highest level in 70 years under the previous administration. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been warned that the UK's asylum system needs a complete overhaul after migrants lost their lives in the Channel yesterday whilst trying to cross in a small boat. At least 12 small boat migrants were killed on Tuesday after their boat capsized, including a pregnant woman and 6 children. This morning, French police struggled to detain more migrants as dozens stormed the beach on the northern coast of France in an attempt to make the perilous journey to Britain. Discussing the increasingly concerning situation for migrant deaths in the Channel, Migrant Support Coordinator Kay Marsh stressed that people are dying in the Channel because our system is broken, calling for an overhaul of the current asylum process. Marsh explained, I do understand the issue is a broken system. People are dying in the Channel because our system is broken. We need a complete overhaul of the immigration system. We need alternative, safe and legal routes to asylum so that people can be brought here safely and legally without needing to risk their lives in a small boat. When pressed by host Bev Turner on what alternative barriers the Labour government can use to help tackle the migrant crisis, Marsh claimed that a new processing centre could be built in France to prevent people from making the journey across the Channel. She said, "There are a number of different things that we could look at. Humanitarian visas were used for the Ukrainian situation. People were brought here very quickly when they needed to be, very safely. They didn't have to navigate small boats or the asylum system at all. If we can build a processing centre in Rwanda, we can build a processing centre in northern France, where people can start their claim before needing to get onto a boat." Host Andrew Pearce disagreed with Marsh's remarks, arguing that France doesn't want a processing centre, and so migrants easily disappear into the black market once they reach UK shores. Marsh responded, "We know that the asylum backlog is huge, and the amount of people currently going through the asylum system is astronomical. So we know that people don't just disappear into the ether. It's not as big an issue as some people like to make out." When questioned on Prime Minister Starmer's plan to tackle the gangs is an effective method of deterrent for migration, Marsh scolded that the move is simply more government rhetoric. Marsh said, "It just feels like more government rhetoric. It's just something that people can say they can't do immediately, but it's be seen to be doing something." The biggest change I want to see around immigration is putting the argument for safe and legal routes for asylum seriously on the table and say, we need to admit now these deterrents aren't working. It's time to try safe and legal routes to asylum. In other news, the King has officially restored the royal status to an iconic Dunkirk warship after 77 years. HMS Wellington is the UK's last remaining Second World War escort ship and has been moored in the Thames near Temple Station since 1948. The vessel lost her status as His Majesty's ship when she was decommissioned from the Royal Navy in 1947. However, the Telegraph reports the King recently approved the use of the HMS title after the Wellington Trust charity lobbied for the change, with Admiral Sir Ben Key, the First Sea Lord, instrumental in the process. Lord West, a former First Sea Lord, said, "This is really good news because it now means we will probably be able to save this iconic ship, the last in the UK of the hundreds of escorts that enabled us to survive the predatory U-boats in the last war." The Princess Royal, a patron of the Wellington Trust, had privately given her backing to the warship, which was first commissioned in 1934. However, the ship is at risk of being scrapped unless £150,000 can be raised to keep her afloat. Historians believe that returning the royal status to the ship has given her a higher profile, which will help in the campaign to save her. Chairman of the Wellington Trust, Professor Dominic Tweddle, said, "We are greatly honoured that His Majesty the King has graciously approved our proposed name change. This change of name in her 90th anniversary year is a true testament to her heritage as the sole surviving dedicated Battle of the Atlantic warship in Europe." HMS Wellington was used for 103 convoy escorts between September 3, 1939 and May 8, 1945, protecting vital maritime supply lines and merchant navy vessels. Hundreds of lives were saved as a result. The ship was also key to the destruction of one enemy U-boat and participated in Operation Dynamo, the evacuation of troops from Dunkirk. The warship would later come into peril when the Honourable Company of Master Mariners, HCMM, which had rented the ship as its floating livery hall, departed after 75 years. There were several ideas to keep the ship floating, including letting cabins for overnight stays, relaunching her as an event space for dinners and receptions, and introducing historical tours. Back in May, the Trust celebrated the 90th anniversary of the ship's launch. Speaking on board, Professor Tweddle said, "Very few of us these days are around or in ships, so will not perhaps appreciate their importance. They are our lifeline to the world. She had a hectic career and an interesting career keeping a lifeline open for Britain during the war." He added that without of ships like HMS Wellington and work by the Merchant Navy, We would have been strangled, and the war could have been lost. What are your thoughts on what we discussed in today's video? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you've not yet already, make sure you do drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more British content. Thank you, take care, goodbye.